Hey everyone, it's Tracy Martirani here from Holistic Wellness with Tracy. Welcome back to my channel. It is a new year here while I'm filming this, and oftentimes this time of year, people are wanting to make some healthy changes, maybe eat a little healthy or exercise. And I'm not a huge fan of New Year's resolutions per se because I don't like the big grandiose changes. It's not that I don't like them, it's because they often fail. We are much better at habit change when we change small things at a time. So today I wanted to talk about an easier way to eat better, and that would be to follow my formula for healthy meals. A little disclaimer here, while I have studied nutrition from both a Western perspective and an Ayurvedic perspective, I am not a registered dietitian. What I'm sharing with you today is what has worked for me and how I try to create healthy meals for myself. If you have a medical issue, you might have to change this. It might not pertain to you. If you're trying to eat more protein or less this, more that, you might have to make some edits to this, but I think the framework will help you no matter what. There are several ways to look at healthy eating, and in order to talk about it, we sort of have to come up with ways of describing food, right? If you remember back many, many years ago to probably my childhood, possibly yours, we were taught the food pyramid. Now here, food was broken down into different categories with like breads, pastas, grains being at the bottom. The vegetable group and fruit group were the next layer on top of that, followed by milk, yogurt, cheese group, and the meat and poultry, fish, dried bean, egg, nut group. And at the top was like fats, oils, that kind of thing. In a way, this was helpful. However, it wasn't really accurate. It wasn't really the healthiest way to eat. It wasn't bad, and it's not bad, but we typically don't want to eat that many carbs anymore. Like most people are trying to get away from that. So then the USDA came out with a new graphic that they call My Plate, which is very helpful. It shows a plate divided into 4 sections with grains, protein, vegetables, and fruit, and then there's clearly a glass of dairy. Neither one of these graphics are bad. I actually do like the My Plate one a little bit better, and I kind of use that sort of as my stepping off place for my formula. Both of them have some issues, and really, no matter how you try to talk about nutrition, you run into issues because there are so many foods that kind of cross back and forth. Like if we look at My Plate, for example, I'm not a fan of milk. Like I am not going to drink a glass of milk with my meal, and I probably wouldn't tell you to do that either. I'm not anti-dairy. I love cheese. I love yogurt. But the thing here is the dairy could be the protein. Like if you were making a meal, this could be yogurt. It could be milk if that's what you want. It could be cheese based. So I'm not saying dairy is bad. I just don't like that round looking like a glass of milk thing because to me that just doesn't work for me. Also, we often combine foods, right? So what might be considered a grain like quinoa is also pretty high in protein. So you treat it as a grain, but you keep in mind that it's a little bit of your protein as well. Some of our vegetables are very starchy, and so they're almost more in the grain, like think potatoes or corn. They're kind of in that grain category, a little less in the veggie category. So it does get a little confusing, and you have to just sort of put foods in categories, and then remember if it feels like this food crosses like into 2 categories, try to balance it out in your head, but don't overthink it, which is why I like this because it's not overthinking it. It's making it very simple, right? Grain, protein, fruit, vegetable, the end. So let's talk about this My Plate because it is sort of, like I said, the stepping off point. It's sort of how I create my meals, most of my meals, is on the right side you have grains and protein. So when you look at the way it's drawn, it shows grains is a little bit bigger than proteins. Like it's not, every section isn't exactly equal. I would argue that for most people, you actually want the protein a little bit bigger, the grains a little bit smaller. Again, I wouldn't lose sleep over it, but most of us want a little more protein in our diet just so that we're filled, like, right? So we get full and we feel satiated. So I would adjust that. I would say more protein than grains. On the left side, you'll see that it is fruit and vegetable. Again, it does show a little bit more vegetable than fruit, which that is a good thing. But for me, I would actually remove fruit from this altogether and just have the whole half of the plate be vegetable. Eating a good salad, 1 to 2 servings of vegetables with every meal. So if you eat multiple meals a day, if you're eating 3 meals a day, then having 1 and occasionally 2 servings of vegetables per meal will get you to that minimum of 5. If you're eating less, like I typically eat 2 meals a day because that's just what works for me, I tend to do 2 servings at each meal, and then I can snack on vegetables or have something else to get to my 5th. I prefer fruit to be more of a snack or a dessert, just a little bit here or there, maybe 1, maybe 2 servings a day. Maybe you make fruit part of your breakfast and then just amp up the veggies for your lunch and dinner. However you cut it, if you're doing the minimum of 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, you really want 3 to 4 of those to be vegetables and only 1 and occasionally 2 of the fruit. More veggies. And then to round back to that dairy, again, I'm not a milk drinker. I would never have a glass of milk with my meal, but I would use dairy as a snack. Maybe some cheese and crackers for an afternoon snack, maybe a little bit of yogurt for a morning snack or part of breakfast if that's what you want. I don't prioritize it in my meal, but I do make sure that I get it throughout the day. What I would recommend is where that glass of dairy is to make that water. Most of us need more hydration. We need more water. You might be tempted to swap out for like a fruit juice. And I get it. We're thinking, ooh, I could get an extra serving of fruit or vegetable by drinking the juice. And yes, that is true. But when you drink the juice, you also lose out on all the fiber. So it's not as filling. It doesn't stay with you. I would always recommend drink water and then eat whole fruit instead of drinking fruit juice. Prioritize water. Now, before we go any further, let's have a quick chat about serving size. For protein, most people consider a serving of protein to be like 7 to 10 grams. Now, if you think about that of 3 meals a day, if you're only having, say, 10 grams with your 3 meals a day, you're coming out to be 30 grams of protein. Now, most people want more protein than that. That is like the minimum. You don't have to go crazy with protein, but that is limited. Most of us, though, don't just eat 1 serving of protein with a meal. If you think about that as being an egg or a little like 3-ounce piece of meat, we're talking like the size of the palm of your hand. We typically eat more than that when we eat a protein food. A lot of times if we're having eggs, we're having 2 eggs. If we're having a piece of meat or fish, it's usually a bigger piece than that. Or what we're serving as our protein food isn't the only protein in our meal. If you're having a piece of fish, but you're also having quinoa, there's protein there. If you're having a salad and you're putting tuna and egg in it along with your meat, there's more protein there. So you do have to keep that in mind everywhere that you're bringing in protein in this instance. But for the most part, if you think 1 serving as an egg or a little piece of meat, you can then think of what does that mean as you create your meal. You're probably going to want more than just 1 serving of protein. When it comes to veggies, we tend to overestimate how much we're eating. So if you think about a salad, a couple big handfuls of your leafy greens will be 1 serving. A nice cup of like diced or chopped veggies, roasted, steamed, raw, however you want to prepare them, 1 cup is a serving. If you picture your plate, maybe last night for dinner, if you put 2 little broccoli florets on your plate, that does not count as a serving of vegetables. And then fruit is very similar. A medium-sized piece of fruit, like an apple or a banana, those would be a serving. If you're eating small fruit like kiwis or plums, you probably need 2 to be a serving. And if you're dicing it up, somewhere between a half a cup and a cup, depending on how much space is between your pieces, is going to be a serving. When we get to the grains, which are really your carbs, if you will, here again, we tend to underestimate. We tend to think, oh, here is a serving of pasta, and it will be a plate full of pasta, and that is not true. A serving of grains is like 1 piece of bread. It's a half a cup of pasta or rice. Half a cup. It's like a half a cup of oatmeal. It's much smaller than we like to think. So always keep that in mind. And then the one thing my plate does not touch on is fats. You do need fat in your diet. You need healthy fats like olive oil or avocado oil or coconut oil. You need maybe avocados in general. Those are just nice to throw on a salad and full of fat. But for most of us, if you're cooking your meals yourself, well, if you're going to a restaurant, you're probably getting plenty of fat, but it's probably not necessarily good fats. But you do need some. And when you prepare your food, you will get plenty of fat just by using olive oil in your pan or putting butter on your toast. You don't really have to think too hard usually about eating enough fats. You tend to have to think about overdoing it because you don't want too much. Again, you need fats, you want fats, but there's a lot of calories in fat. So if you're trying to eat healthy, if you're trying to lose weight specifically, yes, you need fat, but you don't want to overdo it. So just use common sense. Don't go too crazy, but make sure you are including them. That brings us to my simple formula for making your plate, right? Looking at that, my chart, it's going to be very much like that. We're going to do maybe 1 to 2 servings of a protein, a good 2 servings of vegetables, and then 1 to 2 servings of a grain or a carb. In real life, what this might look like, say for breakfast, it might be a piece of vegetable quiche, a side of vegetable hash, and then a slice of whole grain toast to round it out. It might be a serving of oatmeal with some apple blended in and a boiled egg on the side. One of the things I love to do for breakfast, it's really kind of brunchy, but whatever, is to have a nice breakfast salad. So I'll make a big salad with spinach or other nice greens, add a lot of veggies, dress it with just a light like lemon vinaigrette, and then top it with egg. Either fry a couple eggs, put those on top. If you don't cook them too much, let the yolk stay just a little bit moist. That yolk kind of becomes the dressing to the salad, which, depending on you, might sound disgusting, but it's actually delicious. And then a nice piece of toast on the side or half of a whole grain bagel. Yummo. If it comes to lunch, a big bowl of vegetable soup and maybe a half of a sandwich, maybe like 1 piece of bread cut in half, and then chicken salad or tuna salad or egg salad on top. I like to avoid sandwich meats whenever possible just because of all the added look in deli meat. So I like to keep the proteins a little bit more whole and healthy, but whatever works for you. And just like the My Plate graphic shows, dinner can easily just be as simple as a piece of fish or chicken or steak, 2 big servings of vegetables. It can be just double servings of 1 vegetable or do 2 vegetables if that floats your boat. And then a small serving of grains, glass of water, you have dinner. Now, I know not all dinners are that straightforward, right? A lot of our dinners are more like casseroles or weird combinations. You just kind of have to keep that plate in mind of what you're aiming for. One of my favorite dinners to do is grilled eggplant parmesan. So I take eggplant, cut them lengthwise into steaks, grill them, then put on a little marinara sauce and some cheese, put it in the oven, let that all get melty. So you have a nice big piece of veggie already, and then you have some cheese for a little bit of a protein. And then serve that along with some whole grain pasta that you cook up and then blend with sauteed vegetables, maybe some cannellini beans so you get more protein there. You can always use more marinara sauce to add more veggies. Just make it very veggie heavy. Add in the protein where you can, and you have dinner. Don't overthink it. And then come your snacks. I like to think of snacks as a way to round out what you're missing through your meals. So try to keep your snacks healthy. Your snacks don't need to be Snickers bars or Cheetos. If you had breakfast that was maybe oatmeal with some fruit and you feel like you didn't get enough of the fruits and veggies, definitely no veggies and not a whole lot of fruit, maybe have a piece of fruit and a handful of raw vegetables as your snack that day to sort of amp it up. If you had that meal of eggplant parm and you really didn't have a lot of other protein in there, again, adding beans into the meal can help just increase the protein, but maybe just snack on an egg. Have some boiled eggs for a snack. Just up your protein snack-wise. Have some cheese for a snack. You know what I'm saying, right? Fill in the gaps with healthy snacks. And then there's just a handful of things I want to mention, things to keep in mind. Number one, carbs are not evil. They get a bad rap because we tend to eat really crappy carbs and we tend to overeat them. We eat too many. So eat carbs, just in moderation, and try to make sure they're whole grain whenever possible. White potatoes are not evil. You can eat white potatoes. They're actually very filling and very low calorie. So if you're trying to lose weight, sometimes having potatoes is actually a good thing because they fill you up fast. Just remember that if you're having a potato that is your grain, you need more vegetables in addition. And if your vegetables tend to be on the starchier side, so if you're a big fan of corn and peas and potatoes, remember that those really kind of fall into the grain category as well. So if that's the case, if your meal is made up with very starchy vegetables, then maybe don't add any additional carbs or grains to that meal. I mentioned it when we talked about sandwiches, but when it comes to your protein, I would also suggest try to avoid the highly processed foods. I'm talking deli meats, ham, bacon, sausages. You get what I'm saying. Try to stick with healthier options, cuts of meat like chicken or steak or fish or pork. They're all fine. Maybe consider trying to source them from a healthier option. If you have a local farmer, maybe give them your business. If you're trying to up your protein, protein comes with a lot of calories. So if you're trying to eat a lot of protein, but also keep your calories down, one of the easiest things you can do is include things like tofu, beans, lentils. Sneak those things into your food. Add beans to your veggies, add beans to your grains. Make a meal out of tofu. Like it's you can add it in and still have your regular like meat-based, animal-based protein. You don't have to go wild and crazy, but beans are an easy way to just sneak in some extra protein. Try to keep things simple. Making big, elaborate meals makes it much harder to keep track of the proteins and the grains and the vegetables. If you can keep your meals fairly simple, then it makes it easier because complicated meals are sometimes just complicated. To keep things simple, try to just make sure you're eating one serving of vegetables with every meal. That is a great place to start. If you right now don't feel like you eat well and the thought of every meal being like this, using this formula is too much, then don't worry about the formula. Start with just making sure you're getting a serving of vegetables with every meal. And then lastly, if you think you're not a huge fan of vegetables, it might be your cooking method. If you are boiling or steaming vegetables, that's fine, that's great, but that's pretty bland. If you can grill vegetables or roast them, anything you can do to just get some browns and char, a little bit of flavor, add spices, make your vegetables taste yummy. And if there's vegetables that you've never tried, experiment a little bit. Find a good recipe, pick up some vegetables, get cooking. And then the last thing I would say is doing prep work ahead of time also will help. When it comes to breakfast, you can make up quiche and have it in the fridge. You don't even have to heat it up. You can eat quiche cold, you can eat it at room temperature. It makes a really nice way to take a nice healthy protein and possibly veggie rich meal on the go, right? You can make quiche in muffin pans if you want little single servings, or just cut slices and put them in a container. Make a vegetable hash. Roast up a bunch of vegetables on the weekend for a quick dinner so you don't have to spend a lot of time roasting them. You just have to heat them back up. Make it simple, prepare yourself, and then fix your plate. 1 to 2 proteins, 2 vegetables, 1 to 2 grains, glass of water. You probably are dialing it in pretty well. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great day.